Good morning. Welcome to Law Power Hour. Today is Veterans Day, and we should all be proud to live in the United States. We should take a minute and be thankful for all of our veterans that are living and with us and all the things that they've done for this great country of ours so that we could be here. We wouldn't have the freedom that we have without having veterans and the support of our military. Pamela, welcome back.
Good morning, Barry. How are you doing?
Well, that's what she said. Good morning, Barry. We're old friends. This is Pamela Saucy. She's with us again.
Thank you for having me. It's always nice to see you.
And you know, since you were here last time, a lot has happened in the Michigan legal criminal arena.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has.
Now I can carry my gun in church.
Right? Scary notion, huh?
It sure is, especially in light of the recent events that occurred in Texas. Why in the world would anyone want to carry a gun to church? That's God's house. You know, when you put your foot on the gas and you go to church, you got one thing in your mind, prayer, not carrying a gun. So it defies logic why they would want to pass a law that would permit people to carry a gun in church.
Frankly, I don't know why the mentality behind the bill, but what we need to remember, and one of the good things that we need to remember, is that this bill just passed the Senate, and it is not law yet, and it could quite frankly not become law, and it should not become law because it really lessens the restrictions that you have to adhere to be able to carry a gun. You don't even have to go through any type of safety courses to be able to carry that gun.
Okay.
And now we're allowed to potentially carry it in a church, in a daycare center, into a stadium.
Well, I want our listeners to call in on this because it's really an interesting topic. I mean, I can see the headlines in the newspaper 6 months from now, shootout at the Baptist church. Somebody comes in with a gun, or the synagogue, it doesn't matter where it is, if somebody comes in with a gun, because I don't want to pick on the Baptists, this is where this last incident in Texas occurred. Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter is, in a house of worship, a shootout, I mean, it's ridiculous. Somebody comes in with a gun, and there are 4 members of the congregation that pull out their Glocks and start firing. Innocent people are going to get injured regardless of what you do.
Exactly, and we're literally creating at the state level a situation where we're living in the wild, wild west, where everyone is literally just packing heat, and we're taking it to places where you would never think where we would have weapons. For example, the churches. Why would we go to church and carry a gun on us? We're not going to pray. When we go to pray, we don't need rifles. We don't need shotguns. There's no need for that. So the state is very conservative right now, and they're trying to expand our open carry law. So it's really problematic, and we need to make sure that the House does not pass this bill or does not pass a bill that's similar. We need to make sure this bill does not actually become law in Michigan.
And I don't want your listeners to get confused. Pamela is a criminal lawyer. She represents people who were charged with illegal possession of guns. Isn't that true?
Yes, yes. Right now, actually, I had a jury trial scheduled for Monday on a CCW charge, which has been postponed. But in the state of Michigan, if you are carrying a concealed weapon and you are found and arrested and prosecuted, you potentially face up to 5 years in prison. And right now, our state is trying to loosen the restrictions that you actually have to abide by to carry and have a gun, which is very problematic, especially when we're trying to allow people to take these firearms into very sensitive areas like the daycare centers, the movie theaters. And we've seen mass shootings happen at a national level at places like this, at churches, at nightclubs, at daycare centers. I mean, even at elementary schools, we've had shootings across the country.
Imagine on Sunday if the Lions lose and the Browns win, and there's an argument at the stadium about the outcome of the game because somebody is a lifelong Browns fan that's been transplanted to Detroit, and everybody's packing.
Wild, wild west, Barry.
That's a serious issue, and it scares me. It scares me that people would be allowed to bring guns into bars.
Yes, especially when you actually have alcohol in the situation. And that is, when you have a CPL, you cannot have your gun at the same time that you have been drinking any alcohol. You cannot even possess a firearm, or CPL, excuse me, if you have a Medical Marijuana Act, and that's because you have to be in a clear mind when you're operating a gun. And when you get rid of these requirements that the CPL requires, then you could literally carry a gun at any point, as so long as you're literally, bottom line is you can carry it at any point.
You know, we've had gun advocates on the show before who feel that the right to bear arms is a right that we've had since the beginning of time in this country, in the Constitution. And
Yes, and my family has a history of being hunters, and we do have, there should be an atmosphere where we should be able to respect the history of this country and the need to have firearms in certain instances, but there needs to be a balance. We can't just allow every single person to have a gun. There has to be regulations at the state level. We have to know who's actually holding a gun. We have to have background checks. If we allow these open carry laws to become law in this state, we literally get rid of these requirements. We get rid of knowing who the person is that has the gun. And again, we go to a concert, we go to a football game, and we can all literally have a gun so long as it's not concealed in any fashion. So have it strapped on your leg and you're fine, you're good to go.
Okay, let's break this down a little bit in terms of the practical side of it. Thanksgiving's coming up. A lot of families get together. You live in the state of Indiana and you come to Michigan for the holidays. You have a CPL in Indiana. Is that CPL good in Michigan?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Let's get to but you can't, let's say in Indiana, you can open carry. We haven't passed that law yet.
No, thank the Lord we haven't passed that law yet. And that's one thing we need to remember, is that the package that has passed only went through the Senate at this point. And so we still have to see what happens in our House, our state House, and also with our governor. So what I'm praying for is that our House of Representatives looks at this bill and does not want to entertain it at all. But we have to be careful because we have a very conservative government in this state. So potentially this bill could be enacted.
Well, you know, there's veto power that rests with the governor, and he's not one of my favorite people, but notwithstanding that fact, in this instance, his veto power would be very important.
Yes, it would be.
Okay, get back to my question for a second. So I'm allowed to open carry in Indiana, and I come here for the holidays. I'm riding in the car with you. We get stopped. Am I going to get arrested for open carrying in Michigan?
If you have a CPL from Indiana and you're in Michigan and you have the gun in your car, you will not be arrested so long as you have your CPL. But if you come into this state from another state and we do not have the same laws, for example, you may have open carry in Indiana, but we don't have that here in Michigan. So if you don't have your CPL, you're in trouble because you will be arrested under Michigan law.
We got somebody calling in. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm here to comment on the new bill that's in legislation. And I have to say that we live in a different world right now. And fear, believe it or not, is what is going on every day now. You have to be conscious of your surroundings at all times. Daytime, nighttime, middle time, church time, event time. Anytime you have to be conscious because fear, believe it or not, is what's going on today. And I don't say you live in it, but it's about preparing for the worst. I can't help but say that the churches need a gun because they need somebody that if somebody does act a fool, be able to neutralize a situation.
How about they need security in the churches? They don't need guns. I mean,
Okay, I could go for that as long as we have somebody that can neutralize the situation because they're coming to us at our most vulnerable places.
Yes.
They're not dumb, okay? If they want to do evil, they're looking for the best way to do their evil. We need some type of neutralization.
I agree with you, and I agree with Barry. we do need to have, there needs to be security at our daycare centers, at our schools, at our churches, at our stadiums. There need to be people that are professionally trained to be able to handle emergency situations, and they need to be trained how to handle firearms. If we enact these open carry laws, we're getting rid of the training, we're getting rid of the background checks, we're getting rid of all of the things that actually prepare you to be able to be a good gun owner. And so we do need to make sure that we're having security and we're protecting our citizens. But allowing everyone to carry a gun without having adequate training is not the answer.
You know, I want our listeners to understand it's not illegal to buy a gun if you're not a convicted felon, correct?
Correct.
If you get a license to buy the gun, you can keep the gun at home, correct?
Correct.
If you have the gun at home, it sounds like I'm doing a test with you, but I'm not. But you are the authority on the subject. You are a criminal practicing attorney every day of the week, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so she knows. Who else can I rely upon? Somebody that is up on it every day.
And for example, you can have a gun, just like how Barry was saying, in your house. You can have it without having a CPL. It's your private property. It's just that you cannot go out into the public and conceal that weapon. And you have to be very careful with how you transport it as well. Because, for example, as soon as you put a gun into a car and you move onto public property or on a road, that is concealed under our law. So you could be potentially arrested, prosecuted if you do not have that CPL.
But if you keep it in the trunk, it's
Then
not, you're okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay, now I'm going to get to the next question. There's a lot of craziness that goes on during the holidays. People get drunk, they bang on doors, you're at home, you've got a gun. You've got a license for the gun. And just like the gentleman said, there's a lot of fear out here because of what's been going on in the streets. Fear of getting robbed, fear of getting attacked. If somebody comes to the door and I'm in fear and apprehension, can I take my gun and shoot that individual?
Your house is your castle. You're allowed to protect yourself in your home if someone comes into your house. Now, Barry hypothesized a situation where someone's on the porch. That becomes a gray area. If that person's in your house, then you have the right to use your gun if you are in imminent fear of danger. And you don't have the right to, you don't have to retreat in your house if someone's in there and you're in fear of your safety. But Barry has posed a question where, as a defense lawyer, if my client were charged, I would argue that even though he was on the actual porch, he was still within the confines of the house where my client, if he was in fear of his life, would be able to use his gun legally. But Barry, by being on the porch, you're really creating a trial issue.
Well, that was the point. We wanted to create a trial issue because we want people to think about these issues. Now, you and I are riding in the car together, and you're packing, and I don't know it, and we get stopped. And they get me, which will be our next subject today, for illegal possession of marijuana. So they decide to check your purse because they figure if I am possessing marijuana, maybe you're possessing marijuana, and they find a gun in your purse. And you don't have a permit for it.
I'm in trouble.
Am I in trouble as the driver of the car because you have a gun?
For the gun, potentially you could be charged because you're in such a confined area in the car that you could constructively be possessing the gun or have knowledge that it's there. So potentially you could be charged.
So that would be constructive possession.
Correct.
Because as the driver of the car, I'm responsible for everything in the car. Is that correct? We got a couple callers here. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Why do we consider the Second Amendment an absolute law when, if you look at Black's Law Dictionary and define militia, the writers of the Constitution could not have foreseen the kind of weaponry that we have today. And when you define militia as a body of citizens in a state enrolled for discipline as a military force, but not engaged in actual service except in emergencies, as distinguished from regular troops or a standing army. This is from Black's Law Dictionary.
Okay, well, you're getting to the intent.
That that's not a limiting force in the Second Amendment. And I'm not an attorney, but I do have a Black's Law Dictionary.
Well, your point's well taken because the intent originally had to do with the militia.
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead and answer that question.
Well, I mean, the Second Amendment really has historical roots. And again, yes, the country started as a militia, and so we needed to be able to defend ourselves from the English. And so the intent is historical. Now, there's been a lot of, the Second Amendment has to be incorporated into state law. And so there's been a lot of court proceedings to get the expansion of the Second Amendment. And it becomes pretty much a legal argument, but it's based in history. And I don't know if that's answering your question sufficiently, but the Second Amendment literally exists because we needed it at the time that it was enacted. And so what we have is we have a really conservative government and across the nation and in this state, and they're expanding the ability of the Second Amendment and what we can do with the Second Amendment. And that really comes into our own state government and who we are elected at our state level, if that makes sense. And I hope I answered your question.
I think you did. Good morning.
Yes, I'm calling back again because I heard the young lady say something about it would stop the training for the people to be professional. At these events that they have the security, they're not armed. They are not armed. Okay? You have a bunch of unarmed people at them events, which leaves us vulnerable. We need to have some kind of deterrent. We need to let them be aware that they're not going to do the mass destruction that they plan because we are prepared. We live in a very different world now than when the Second Amendment came out. The world is much more dangerous, and we have people that are over here that are sleeper cells that are waiting on instructions to do damage.
I know, but we have a problem. And here's the problem. If we have too much authority at all of these activities, then we have a police state controlling everything that we do while we're there. So we have to have a balance. So if we have a form of security where you have to go through a metal detector, and we have the stadium, for example, pass a rule that no guns permitted, the stadium has a right to do that because they own the property, correct?
Correct.
So they can ban the guns even though they're permitted.
Yes. And I agree with the caller. I think that we need to have security that actually has firearms, has mechanisms to protect the public if an emergency situation happens. I don't think that everyone should be allowed to carry a gun wherever they want. But in churches, in schools, in vulnerable situations, there should be security that is experienced and trained in how to handle these emergency situations. And if that means that these people have to be trained on how to use a firearm if someone comes in to shoot a church up or an elementary school, then we should take the proper procedures to make sure that we have that. We should not have children being susceptible to someone just coming into their elementary school and shooting their teachers and shooting the children. There should be someone that's trained on staff that knows how to take that person down. So I think there is a balance, but we do need to make sure that we are protecting the public. We just can't allow every single citizen to bear arms and to try and self-help and fix the situation themselves. We need to train people in how to handle these situations.
We're going to take a break for a minute, and we're going to be right back to talk about the new medical marijuana laws and what you have to do to qualify to get a medical marijuana card. Thank you.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Call 1-800-529-8721. That's 1-800-LAW-USA1. and watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. That's Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law, Saturdays at 10 a.m. here on WHPR Detroit Live.
We're going to talk about a real sensitive issue, because a lot of folks don't like the fact that they passed medical marijuana laws in the local level and the state. Isn't that true?
Yeah, it's a very controversial topic at the city, state level, because we've got a lot of overlapping of different laws going on.
It's still illegal at the federal level, isn't it?
Yes, marijuana is a controlled one substance. The federal government says you cannot possess marijuana.
So I get on an airplane in Detroit and I'm going to go visit my sister in San Francisco. I can't take my stash with me on the plane, can I?
No, unless you want to get stopped by the feds.
Okay, remember that if you're going on vacation. Suppose I have a medical marijuana card.
It doesn't matter. Under the federal law, marijuana still is not allowed to be consumed for a medical reason. That's a state law that allows that to happen. And if the federal government wants to come in and say, hey, Michigan, you can't do this anymore, they have every right to do that. It's called federal preemption. It's just that they haven't.
So you've got to travel by car if you want to transport your marijuana with you when you go visit your relatives for Thanksgiving.
Yes, but still that becomes problematic, because if you're the person that has the medical marijuana card, you should not be driving, because you can be potentially pulled over and charged for operating with the presence of drugs or impaired driving, which are both criminal misdemeanors, and they're non-expungible in the state of Michigan.
Now we have this new procedure. It's called stop and swap. We had these implied consent laws before, and people had a difficult time understanding under the implied consent laws. If you're driving under the influence of alcohol, you have to consent to a breathalyzer test, or if they take you in and you haven't had a PBT, preliminary breath test, in the field, that they're going to take you to the hospital and draw blood from you.
Yes, but you have to remember, and I tell my clients that PBTs, you can refuse a PBT. It's a civil infraction. And also with these new swabbings for marijuana, it's also a civil infraction. When officers pull you over and they take these tests, the PBT, the swabbing, they're getting probable cause. They're getting more probable cause so that they can then take your blood. Because in Michigan, if the cops actually have probable cause that you have something in your system, that you're intoxicated, you have drugs, then they can, and they get to the point where they have that probable cause, they can take your blood. And you have no right to say, no, you can't take my blood.
So if they take your blood and you test positive for drugs, what's the penalty?
You could be potentially charged with operating a vehicle with the presence of a controlled substance, and you could also be charged with operating a vehicle while being impaired. Because in Michigan, no matter what the substance that you have in your body is, if it impairs your ability to drive a vehicle in a safe way, you can be charged with a 93-day misdemeanor. It's non-expungible as well, meaning if you're convicted or if you plead guilty to it, it's never coming off your record.
So here's the bottom line. If you're going to use marijuana, you've got to use it at home. If you get in the car, you can't go down to the party store.
If you're going to take it in your car, you better not be the driver. And if you have a medical marijuana card, you have to be very careful with whether or not your driver's license actually allows you to drive on the road with having marijuana in your system. Because our law does not allow for the medical marijuana card to be an exception. So, for example, I have a medical marijuana card, so I can drive with marijuana in my system. That is not the case in Michigan. A lot of people say you can have your medical marijuana card or you can have your driver's license in Michigan, but you're not going to be able to really have both.
Now, we're going to have a proliferation of one-stop shops where you can get marijuana if you have a legal marijuana card, correct?
Yes, we had a big we had a big ballot initiative that passed in the city of Detroit just this past week.
It was amazing that you had such a small turnout. What, do you have 11,000 voters?
The turnout in Detroit for the last election, I believe, was 21%, just above, but yes, the turnout is horrendous. And low turnout actually has very negative impact on the laws that are enacted, on the officials that are enacted, because you're getting a small amount of the community making the change.
Yeah, and that's the fault of the community for not getting engaged. If you don't get engaged, you can't complain.
Exactly.
And the way you dissent is by voting.
Exactly. You have to exercise your right, your
You know,
voice.
If you don't exercise your rights, you can't complain about what's going to occur. Now, they're going to have marijuana shops.
All over.
Yeah, and just think about it. One-stop shop, you go to the marijuana mall. You want cookies, you want brownies, you want oil?
Detroit, yes, we literally, when you go in Detroit right now, you see dispensaries all over the place. And now we actually have a ballot initiative that passed that says we can have more of these dispensaries and we can have them closer together. We can have them by liquor stores. We can have them by churches. We can have them by parks. We can have them within 500 feet of one another so that literally you can have dispensary after dispensary after dispensary. And our state law is allowing for this.
But you know, there's something really interesting that no citizen pays attention to. I want a medical marijuana card. I'm going to get that card. Well, I go to work, and my employer says, well, go over to the clinic. I want to check you out because I don't think that you're functioning well on the job, and you test positive for drugs, you can get fired.
Exactly.
So having a medical marijuana card is not a license to go to work under the influence of drugs.
No, it's not.
And having a medical marijuana card doesn't assure you, if you get hurt at work and you go to the clinic and you test positive, that you're not going to get fired.
Exactly. Michigan's an at-will work environment. Unless you have a contract, an employment contract, if you come in and you test positive for marijuana, if the company has a policy where it's zero tolerance, then you can be fired. Or if you have an employment contract, a lot of times there are provisions in it that say you can't come to work high or you can't test positive for drugs. So just because the state has these new laws doesn't mean that they're not copacetic with other things that are going on in the state. They don't necessarily work together because private companies can say no.
You know, in my years of practice, I've represented probably more than 100 individuals who've been fired because they were injured at work and they went for a medical exam. When they went for the medical exam, they figured because they were kicking back at home, they could smoke a joint. And they tested positive and they got fired. They just don't understand. They just don't understand the implications.
And, for example, you just brought up a situation where if you're injured at work. In a typical situation, if you are injured at work, you file a workers' compensation claim. But if you do file a workers' compensation claim and they put you through that exam and they test you and you come up positive for a drug, they could use that to deny your coverage under the workers' compensation claim. Because, hey, maybe you got injured because you had marijuana in your system. That's what they're going to argue.
One of many things.
Yes.
Good morning. Good morning. Apparently it wasn't that important, but the fact of the matter is they may claim you contributed to your own injuries.
Exactly.
So the best thing is, if you have a medical marijuana card, you should tell your employer you have a medical marijuana card.
Yes, and you should find out what the internal policy is for wherever you work in regards to having an actual prescription for marijuana.
Because some employers may tolerate it, but if you're working in the trades and you're working with tools, I seriously doubt that they're going to tolerate it.
The trades do not tolerate it. My family's all part of the IBEW, and they're part of the UAW, and you go through stringent drug tests to be able to get into the programs, to be able to get a job, and that's because you're dealing with machinery, you're dealing with equipment, you're dealing with people's lives. And the bottom line is marijuana is still considered a drug, and it does have effects on your body and your ability to, like coordination ability, concentration ability. So Bottom line is still considered a drug.
Now, if I don't have a medical marijuana card, and I'm not going to go into how to get a medical marijuana card on the air because I'm not in that business, I'm going to tell you the pros and cons of having the card and what the effect is. If I don't have a card, and I'm driving the car and I have marijuana in the car, what kind of crime am I going to be charged with?
Well, it depends on how much you're actually carrying. If you're carrying a small amount, then you could be charged with possession. You could also be charged with operating with the presence of the drugs in your system if they test you and it's in your system. If you have more than a certain amount of quantity, or if you have it packaged in multiple packages, you could be charged with a felony. You could be charged with delivering and manufacturing of marijuana. So just because you're possessing marijuana, if you do not have a valid prescription in the state of Michigan, is always going to be there's always going to be criminal liability attached to it. So if you have a small amount, you're susceptible to a misdemeanor. If you have a large amount, you may be charged with a felony.
And if you have a real large amount, you can go to jail for life.
Yes. Or you could be indicted by the federal government.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My question is regarding recreation. Is it legal in Michigan or not?
Recreational marijuana use is legal based on local communities. So at the state level, it's not legal. At the state level, only medical marijuana is legal.
Okay, Detroit.
In Detroit, recreational, it's legal. In Ann Arbor, recreationally, it's legal. But once you get out of the confines of those areas, then you're opening yourself up to be arrested. And for example,
Is a card needed for that?
I'm sorry, sir?
Is a card needed for that?
No, not for recreational marijuana use in a municipality that has it legal. And there are certain cities in Michigan, Flint, Ann Arbor, Detroit. There are actually a lot of cities, Ferndale, and I don't want to say cities that are incorrect, but if you are within those cities that allow it recreationally, then you don't need a medical marijuana card.
But I guarantee you, if you're driving, listen, this is real important.
Yes, this is very
I
important.
guarantee you, if you're driving the car and you're using recreational marijuana, and the officer detects the odor of the marijuana in the car, they're going to swab you and they're going to check you to see if you're driving under the influence. And then you're going to be charged, correct?
Yes. You never want to, bottom line is you don't want to get into a car when you have pot. If you have a medical marijuana card, no. If you don't have a card, no. The car is not the safe place to do it. You can be pulled over and arrested for multiple reasons. If you are in a city where it's recreationally legal, you could do it you could potentially do it on your porch or in your house. But there are even certain properties within cities, for example, colleges. In Ann Arbor, if you're caught on University of Michigan property with marijuana, you can still be charged with possession. And that's because you're on actual university property and you're not in the city property. So these recreational marijuana ordinances are great, but they create gray areas because even within the communities, you can do certain things and you can't do other things.
They have their limitations, is
Yes.
what we're trying to say. Good morning.
Oh, good morning. How you doing?
We're doing well, thank you.
Good morning.
Okay, good. I suffer from chronic pain, sciatic nerve pain, and my doctor, he prescribes a narcotic pain pill for me called Subutex. And if I get stopped driving my car, can they arrest me for being under the influence or something, like if I'm zigzagging or something like that, and they test me and I show a positive for narcotic opioid, as they call it now.
Sir, you brought up...
Is legally prescribed, so I'll listen off the air.
Okay, I
And
want
also
to...
one other thing, too. I don't have a CPL for my gun, but if somebody starts some trouble with me and my life is threatened, and I'm on my property raking leaves in the back or in the alley, if I shoot them, can I be legally charged? And I'll listen off the air. Thank you.
Okay. I want to thank you. Both of those are very important questions. I know we've got another call holding. We're going to get to your call. Give us the answer on these.
Okay, let's start with the gun in the back, or in the alley. If you are on your property, in your personal property, and you're in fear for your life, then using your fire weapon, your weapon without a CPL, you'd be allowed to do it. You may potentially still be charged, and you have to, build your defense that you were on your property, that someone came up onto your property, was endangering your life. But I would argue that you should not be held liable for any type of offense if that's the factual situation. I'm not saying that a cop can't arrest you and charge you, because that happens all the time, but I, as a defense lawyer, would say you have a valid defense. You have a good argument.
Okay. Our time's limited, so I'm going to answer the second question, if you
Okay.
don't mind.
I talk too much, sorry.
No, you don't. You give a lot of great information. If you're driving under the influence of narcotics, even if they're prescribed narcotics, you shouldn't be driving the car. That's the bottom line, because you're putting yourself and the community in danger.
Yes. And again, no matter what you have in your system, if you are impaired, you can be charged with driving while visibly impaired, which is a misdemeanor, and it's non-expungible.
Good morning, caller.
Yes. In Detroit, can a recreational user grow his own plant?
Well,
How many?
I believe under the new ballot initiative that you can grow your own, but I'm not going to give a definitive answer on that because I've got a question in my head.
Okay, give him your telephone number, and he'll call you next week, and you'll get the answer for him.
Okay, my telephone number, I'm going to give you my cell phone, is 313-318-5992. Because frankly, you just posed a question that I need to find the answer to.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day. Pamela, thank you for coming. We had fun.
Thank you. Fun as always, Barry.
Okay, we're going to take a break for a minute.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Call 1-800-529-8721. That's 1-800-LAW-USA1. And watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. That's Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law. Saturdays at 10 a.m. here on WHPR Detroit Live.
On my show, up to the 30th of this month, we're going to talk about the Construction Trades Resource Fair, which is going to be held November 30th. And today we have Prudence Rose and Odell Jones with us. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
You
for
know,
having us.
we all have one thing in common. We're all going to be at that fair, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
And we're all going to participate because it's a 3-stage fair, isn't it?
That's correct. There are 3 phases to this fair.
Okay. Prudence, tell us about Phase 1.
Well, Phase 1 is called Removing the Barriers. And what we're going to do in Phase 1 is people have certain barriers that don't allow them to get a job in the union trades or in any kind of building trades because they have these certain barriers. So what we're going to do is we're going to have people there, attorneys and medical people, different people there that will talk about and help them with expungements. They will help with child care, child issues, money issues. They will help with drugs if they have a drug issue, and they will help with driver responsibility. And we've got different people set up to come there that day to help them with those barriers and help them understand what they need to do in order to get into the trades.
And everybody listen up, it's a no arrest zone.
It's a safe zone, yes.
Yeah, I want you to know this because most of the time when we put a program on, the fear of God gets in people and they don't show up. I want you to show up because you can't get arrested here. The friend of the court can't arrest you and the popo can't arrest you. You can come to the program and the police are going to leave you alone. I mean it, because most of the time they're buzzing around the parking lot and people don't want to come in. They're discouraged. We want you to show up. Odell, tell us about the program. What's going to go on there in terms of the construction trades, please?
Well, the important aspect, I feel, of the program is it is intended to identify and to help remove barriers to employment in the trades. Oftentimes you hear about job fairs or employment fairs being conducted, and you go and you discover that it was a tremendous waste of time because there are things that are required that you can't satisfy or criteria that is being imposed that you can't meet, and then you leave disappointed. The true focus, the intent of this program is to help individuals understand that if they're willing to work on their issues, we are willing to put them in touch, in contact with people that can help them address and resolve them. We're seeking to remove barriers to employment, not produce reasons why you can't get a job.
So if you're at home, you don't have a job, you have a criminal record, you've been out of Jackson Prison for 5 years, you want an expungement, you haven't raped anybody, come on down and we'll help you.
You need to be here.
That's pretty ugly to say it that way, but it's the truth.
No, they need to be there.
Yeah, and if you want to get a job, you want to get back on your feet, you want to learn a trade, you've got to be here because we're trying to remove the barriers. And removing the barriers is just not involved with getting an expungement or getting your driver's record straightened around or dealing with the friend of the court. It involves a lot of other aspects. Talk about a few of those, please, Odell.
If you have soft skill issues that are barriers to employment, conflict resolution, the importance of being able to get to work on time, but you have transportation challenges, if you have academic or educational limitations, these are all things that oftentimes preclude gainful employment in the trades. We're here to help remove those barriers so that you will become suitable and attractive candidate for employment in the trades.
Now, Prudence, your role in the program from the construction trades point of view is really interesting. You were involved in the construction industry for how many years?
Well, I have been in the construction industry for over 28 years. 24 of them, I was in the operations of managing an electrical contracting firm. And from doing that, I realized that there are a lot of things that have to happen with working with the union, working with the apprenticeship schools, and I have a background in knowing what needs to be done to get people in the trades.
And you actually go to schools and speak on these subjects, don't you?
Absolutely. I go to all the Detroit schools. I go to the suburban schools. I also speak to groups that have parents without partners that are in need of a job. This isn't just for your 18-year-old young man or woman out of high school. This is for people in their 20s and 30s and sometimes even their 40s. It can be any age if there's a need for that person. And the thing is that going out there and getting someone 30 years old a job in the construction trades where they're going to make anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000 a year when they graduate, that's life-changing. This is not a job. This is a career. And I want people to realize that. They're going into a career. This will help sustain them. This will help them get their children good educations. This will help them get a nice home if they live in the city of Detroit. It's to help build Detroit back up. There are so many aspects to this, and I know I'm very passionate about it, but I am, because I realize the need for people like Odell and myself and all the people that are involved in this construction fair. We're there because we want to see Detroit, and we want to see it prosper. We want to see people have jobs, and now is the time. There are jobs out there.
This is a three-step program. First is to make sure that we can remove barriers. The second one is to help you identify the areas that you want to go into.
That's correct.
We talked about that before the program.
Indeed. You know, there are a tremendous number of opportunities in the field of construction. Many of them, most people don't really even know exist. And so beyond the basic, plumbing, mechanical, electrical, disciplines, there are other disciplines that are available also. A lot of times you don't know what you want to do until you're presented with the options, and there's someone there to help you explain. Someone told me once, I don't want to lift a lot of heavy pipe. Do you know insulators make a good living in the construction industry?
Well, here's what's really interesting. We've got a new bridge that's going to go up, the Gordie Howe Bridge. I would guess that there'll be at least 10,000 new jobs available because of the Gordie Howe Bridge for the next 5 years and the development and completion of the bridge.
Absolutely.
And the skilled trades are going to be involved in all aspects.
Absolutely.
So if you go in as an apprentice, you come out as a journey person, then you can get a license. If you want to open your own business as an electrician, if you want to open your own business as a plumber or a painting contractor, you're going to learn the industrial side of it, aren't you?
Absolutely. But I think it's important to make this point. You heard Prudence talk about the difference between a career in construction and an opportunity, to improve the quality of life for you and your family. This is really not the industry to go to for a microwave experience. There's no instantaneous, gratification or reward in construction. It is a decision that you would make that would be a decision that would direct your career for some time. So yes, we want you to come. Yes, the road might be long. The commitment is to not drop your hand on the journey. If this is something that you truly want to do, we're here to see to it that you're successful.
And you have to look at it from my perspective as a lawyer. We want to remove the barriers. So if you have the expungement, you have a driving problem, we remove the driving problem, we neutralize the friend of the court issue,
That's
and
correct.
get you into a program. And if you have some aptitude problems, you need some skills that have to be developed in math or reading or even blueprints, you start learning these skills. You get paid while you're learning these skills. PAID. There's money coming in every week while you're learning these skills because there's grant money available for some of these programs. Not for all of them, but for
That's
some of
correct.
the programs. And there's some developmental money available through the state and initiatives through the state to help support some of these programs so that you can move forward.
That's correct.
Don't be discouraged. And it's also a stepping stone for individuals who want to go on with college. It's very interesting. If you learn a trade, you can go to college afterwards. I can't begin to tell you how many building inspectors I've met with master's degrees
That's right.
who worked in various communities who started out as plumbers and carpenters and electricians. And they went on and they got the trades behind them. Some of them even went on to law school.
Barry, I actually know construction lawyers who started as laborers, became journeymen, paid for college, graduated with no debt because of their career in construction, and have professional degrees and licenses.
Yeah, go call a plumber to come to your house tomorrow. Pay him or her $300 an hour on Sunday.
Yeah.
And if your house has got a big broken pipe and you've got no water coming in, you got some work to do on Sunday. Or if your power's out, call an electrician to come in because your box is all messed up. What are you going to do?
Look at what just happened this week. A dip in temperature. Heating contractors' phones are ringing off the hook.
There wasn't a day that I was in my neighborhood that I didn't see a different heating and cooling company coming in. In fact, in my own house, I'm going to have some window people come in this afternoon because a few of those windows are bringing in too much of a breeze.
Yep.
I'm not going to give any plugs for the people on the air.
You know, I'd like to mention that one of the things is these are earn as you learn programs, like Odell said. And you start out as an apprentice making anywhere from $15 to $22.50 an hour. And you get a raise every 6 months or once a year. And when you finish these 2 to 5 year programs, depending on which one you pick, you are a few credits shy of an associate's of an associate's degree at a junior college level. And we work with the different colleges to get you that degree. And some, I think there's 2 trades that want you to have it before you even get your journeyman license. So, and once you get that, that is a pathway to college. Because once you get that, you've got no college debt. You can go to work. You can go to school at night. You can become a project manager, an estimator. You can get your master's license, which will afford you the opportunity to become an owner of a company.
Tell me where to go for the program, not tell me where to go.
Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church on November the 30th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Where's it located?
It's located on West Grand Boulevard and Grand River.
And it's a safe harbor.
It is a
I'm
safe
going to
harbor.
tell you every week that it's a safe harbor.
Yep.
So you can show up and
So,
participate.
yep. So for those who are not familiar geographically, let's give the physical address. It's 2080 West Grand Boulevard, Detroit, Michigan, 48208.
And thank you both for coming.
Thanks for
Thanks
having
for
us.
having us.
Okay.
You're watching W33BY, Detroit, Highland Park, Michigan.